The Durham report is coming out, and people will go to prison. This, according to Devin Nunes, who's on the House Intelligence Committee. Oh my gosh, it's about time. I mean, I don't know about people going to prison, but for goodness sakes, can we just get this darn report out? We've been waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, right? Hello, everyone. I am Trish Regan, and that's the big news out today that I wanted to tell you about because perhaps finally we may actually get a chance to see this. That would be nice, right? Devin Nunes, meanwhile, says that some people may actually go to prison. Again, he's on the House Intelligence Committee, and he was speaking with my very good friend, the wonderful Sarah Carter, on the Sarah Carter Show, and he told her that he does expect Justice Department Special Counsel John Durham to release a very damaging report on the FBI's debunked investigation into former President Trump and Russia. He also said he expects it will lead to prison sentences for some former senior Obama officials. Well, again, I don't know about that, but I do know that you do not engage in spying on individual Americans all because, well, maybe you don't like the candidate, you don't like Trump, maybe you have a hunch about him. But you know what? You don't go and commission, as some opponents did, a bunch of seedy research, and let alone use that seedy research if you're the U.S. government, which had never been confirmed. I mean, my goodness, you don't think the FBI or the CIA or somebody could have confirmed what they had seen in this seedy report? But no, they used that to then wiretap a guy's phone, Carter Page, who's working on the campaign. I mean, this is pretty wild stuff. And by the way, to get that permit, to get that permission from the judge, they never bothered telling the judge that our FBI was investigating one of the guys that was doing this research. Remember Christopher Steele, he's the ex-British spy. Well, he employed a guy that our own government suspected of being a Russian spy to help compile this report. I mean, they knew the whole thing was shady, but they didn't care, right? They went right ahead, marched forward, and did what they wanted to do anyway. And, then the Mueller report and all that came out of it. I mean, what a total detour for our country. How bad is that? In other words, our intelligence departments, well, they knew that this was faulty research. They knew that it was questionable, but they didn't really care, right? Because perhaps they had an agenda. I know they didn't like Trump. You know they didn't like Trump, but that is never a reason to do what they did. Meanwhile, there's a new article out today, and actually The Guardian talking about some Kremlin papers that suggested that Vladimir Putin saw Trump as somebody that he wanted to get elected versus Hillary Clinton. I mean, I think a lot of people wanted to get Donald Trump elected versus Hillary Clinton. I don't think that would be especially unique to Putin. But anyway, in this particular document that they say that they found and they got their hands on, it seems to be suggesting that Vladimir Putin felt like Trump more than Clinton could weaken America. Well, that's an interesting thing because I don't actually think it's Trump that was weakening America, but rather the mainstream media that was effectively doing Putin's job for him, right? You got to think about that. You got to take it a step further. It's the division that ensued because so many left-wing nuts hated him so much. I mean, I would say this. I do believe that had Hillary Clinton won, there were enough people that hated her too, that you also would have been on the verge of this total division and destruction. None of this is good, right? United we stand, and yet we're so divided right now. But the media is not helping. The media, like CNN, hating him so much that they really just threw out all kinds of wild accusations, and they were willing to treat things that had not been verified as fact. I mean, you talk about conspiracy theories, right? They were talking about that dossier night after night. You don't think that weakened America? It certainly did. And right now I can tell you we are weak because a brand new poll shows just exactly how divided we are. In fact, nearly 40% of all Americans would like to secede from the United States. See ya, right? It's interesting. A lot of Republicans in the South feel like, we just want our South back. And then the Northerners in the Pacific Northwest, Democrats, are like, well, we just want our Pacific Northwest back. Let me share this data point with you. Going through it, 2 out of 3 Southern Republicans want to secede from the U.S. This is according to that new poll done by YouGov and Brightline organization. 66% of Republican Southerners want to secede from the U.S., with 43% of Republicans in mountain states saying they want to secede. And then how do you like this? You've got nearly 50% of Democrats out in the Pacific Northwest saying they want to secede. I mean, wow. Again, this is a YouGov Brightline poll, and what it proves is that we are, in fact, more divided than ever. So in some respects, our enemies have kind of gotten their way, right? Because they've divided us and made us sort of incapable of focusing on the big picture because we're, too concerned that, we're too concerned about things that, frankly, we shouldn't be concerned about, right? They write that, quote, the legitimacy of the 2020 presidential election and Donald Trump's actions afterwards remain central to how Americans assess political candidates. Right, because you're, like either with them or against them. There's no actual middle ground. There's no dialogue, by the way. You're not allowed to have dialogue, right? You get shut down if you actually try and entertain a discussion with the other side. Think about how tragic that is. In the past 6 months, Democrats and Republicans have not budged in how to reward or punish prospective candidates, the study writes, for voting to certify the election and for Trump's impeachment. Right. So nobody's getting beyond that. And so we've got this big division, and that's where the weakness comes from. And again, we have none other than our mainstream media to blame because of the hysterics that we've witnessed over the now last 5 years. And they really have been hysterics, right? And they do this over and over and over again to conservatives. Remember how much Mitt Romney was hated and how he was ridiculed by the left when he looked like a threat? So don't think it's entirely specific to Trump. You can go all the way back to Regan, right? And how they treated Reagan. The left doesn't like the right, and they're in control of the narrative. They're in control of the media. So think about what that does to the country. And then when you get somebody who's like, okay, well, I'm going to take this on. I'm going to fight back. And, you can debate whether he should have done that or not. There are those that say, well, he should have been presidential and, acted a certain way. You've got everyone firing against you in the media. And so the minute you actually just say, hey, enough with it, well, they go even more crazy. Anyway, you look at the fact that we had the entire Mueller investigation. By the way, not one impeachment, but 2 impeachments, right? The whole Mueller investigation, 2 impeachments. All of this was really motivated by political reasons. And it tells you that we are no different than any of those banana republics. Yeah, those banana republics, places like Cuba, places like Venezuela. Cuba is going through, HELL right now, if you think about it, those poor people, thousands of protesters in the streets, they're all in trouble right now. Journalists that are trying to speak up for the truth, they're in trouble. How dare they, right? Speak up against the communist regime in Cuba. They're actually shutting off the internet so that people cannot speak up and so that the story and the truth can not get out. Sound familiar? In different ways, shape, or form. We don't want to be that, right? But in some ways, it sometimes feels like we're not a whole lot better because when there's a viewpoint that somebody doesn't agree with, well, they shut it down. Like Cuba shuts down the internet. They think that this is the right thing to do for the country. But I can tell you, as a journalist, not being allowed to investigate where the virus comes from or share with you any bit of information, that's a real problem. Look, it's me, so it doesn't really bother me. I'm willing to take that head on as long as I can pursue the truth. But, it's really important that we as journalists be able to tell you what's going on and as opinion makers as well, because some of us have opinions on these things, and we need to be able to share that with the public. And so, if you're Cuba, you want to make sure that those opinions don't get out there. You want to make sure that the information doesn't get out there. And so you just shut it all down. Again, that's sort of similar to what happened. Remember when there was the discussion about where the origin of the Wuhan virus was? You were not allowed to talk about where it may have actually come from, maybe Wuhan, because that in and of itself was considered a conspiracy theory. Even though the president, and maybe it's because the president at the time, President Trump, had said that he had seen intelligence which suggested that it could have been out of Wuhan. Well, it turns out he was right. He was right. But, if he says something, somehow it's just flat out wrong. And then you get the whole internet conspiring against him and anybody that might be trying to dig into that angle. You're not allowed. And so he said he had seen the intelligence suggesting it came out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And now we're learning, of course, sure enough, there is evidence that suggests it may have come out of the Wuhan Institute of Technology. We don't know yet. We're still waiting on that report from the Biden administration. But we deserve to know the truth here. We deserve, in this free country of ours, it's still a free country, last I checked, right? To be able to at least have these discussions. You should be able to at least talk about them with each other and not risk, getting canceled because of it. I'll risk it. I'll risk it all day long. Bring it on, okay? To all the social media companies. But what was really amazing was how they would go and shut down the flow of information. So those algorithms would kick in. If I was talking to you about something like this, boom, nobody got to see it, right? The shadow banning is real. They would effectively try and bury you as you were trying to get the news out. How is that really and truly entirely different than what we're seeing happen with the government in Cuba right now? Not to mention, the White House is now coming out, Jen Psaki, the communications flack for the White House, saying that they're working with Facebook to shut down any quote-unquote misinformation on the virus. So how is it their job to work with such a huge tech entity to decide what people can see and what people can't see? By the way, with that in mind, I want you to follow me on MeWe. MEWE. It's a brand new platform. It's supposed to be like the anti-Facebook because they don't have algorithms that hide things like that. So MeWe.com/Trish Regan. I have a page there now. Just started it. Anyway, finally, I just want to point out that Joe Biden is coming forward and telling us finally that communism is not good. I mean, it took him this long. What's it been, like a week? Well, what was holding him up? I mean, I know Obama loved Cuba. Obama loved vacationing in Cuba, doing the wave and all that. Remember that? But let's be clear. The president needs to stand up to the extremists in his party. And while AOC and Black Lives Matter and others love communism, Marxism, that is not a system of government that would ever work here. So they should listen up. I'm going to throw Bernie Sanders in with this crew too. AOC, Black Lives Matter, for anyone that, thinks that we should just throw away this great, prosperous country with all the hope and all the opportunity we have. Just look at Cuba. Look at what's going on right now. Why would it take this long for the president to admit that this is all a disaster and communism itself is a disaster? This is not about vaccines, right? It's not about embargoes. I mean, AOC would tell you, oh, well, we didn't have the right trade policies with Cuba. That's why the people are so disadvantaged, at such a disadvantage. No. Look, we need right now to think about how we stay prosperous in light of everything that's happening in the world. You've seen the inflation numbers. You know how much the average American worker is just getting gouged right now, right? When it comes to buying anything, food, diapers, gasoline, housing. Joe has made it so attractive to stay home on the couch with all those unemployment checks. Uncle Joe, that is. You've heard me. I joke because the old thing, Uncle Sam wants you. It's like Uncle Joe wants you to stay home on the couch. Nobody's going to work, right? And so small business owners are being hurt as well. This is a problem. I mean, if we're going to continue to grow, we don't want to be like Cuba. I just want to get to another bit of news that is coming out. Just came forward yesterday. A Congressional Black Caucus member led a protest on Capitol Hill, brought a bunch of protesters into Capitol Hill, which is pretty alarming. And I would just say, hasn't everybody learned their lesson, right? Donald Trump is in a whole bunch of trouble because he spoke to protesters outside of Capitol Hill. But she's actually leading them in there. Hey, come one, come all, let's go protest inside Capitol Hill. That's a no-no right now. But nobody seems to be worked up about that. They should be, right? I mean, this is the same team of people that told us how awful it was for Trump to talk about any of these things. Anyway, I want to thank you so much for tuning in as always. I want to encourage you, TrishIntel.com. Go to TrishIntel.com. Sign up for my newsletter. Don't let them shadow us. So sign up for the newsletter. Read the articles there. Engage with me on all the social platforms. I look forward to talking with you again tomorrow. Have a wonderful day, everyone. And remember, live free or die.